The Christmas lights strung along the rafters of Riverside Tavern cast a warm glow that did nothing to ease the knot in Marcus Chen's stomach. He sat at a corner table near the window overlooking the Charles River, watching couples and families pass by on the sidewalk outside, their breath forming clouds in the December cold. His fingers traced the rim of his beer glass, untouched for 20 minutes, while he waited for a woman whose face he had only seen in a profile photo his sister had texted him 3 days ago. This was attempt number 12. 12 blind dates in 24 months, each one ending the same way. Polite conversation that turned stilted the moment he mentioned Sophie. The women would smile, nod, make understanding noises. Then came the shift, subtle but unmistakable, when their eyes would glaze over and they'd start checking their phones. Within 15 minutes, they'd remember a forgotten appointment, an early morning meeting, a sick cat that needed attention. Marcus understood. A 44-year-old accountant with a 7-year-old daughter wasn't exactly a catch in the dating world of Boston's professional class. Add in the modest salary, the rental house in Somerville, and the complete absence of weekend availability due to soccer practice and art classes, and you had a recipe for romantic failure. He'd made peace with it, mostly. Except on nights like this, when loneliness felt like a physical weight pressing against his chest. The woman, Vanessa, a yoga instructor Rachel had met at her gym, arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes late. She had kind eyes and wore her blonde hair in a high ponytail. Marcus stood, shook her hand, tried to read her expression as her gaze swept over him. He'd worn his best shirt, the blue one Jennifer had bought him before Sophie was born, pressed until the creases were sharp enough to cut paper. For 20 minutes it went well. Vanessa taught power yoga in Cambridge. Marcus explained forensic accounting in terms that didn't make people's eyes glaze over. He was good at finding patterns in financial data, spotting the irregularities that meant someone was cooking the books. She laughed at his joke about depreciation schedules. He laughed at her story about a student who'd fallen asleep mid-downward dog. The conversation flowed. Then Vanessa asked if he had children. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her the photo that lived as his lock screen. Sophie at Boston Common 2 weeks ago, gap-toothed smile, holding up a drawing of a reindeer she'd made at school. Red-brown leaves scattered around her feet, pure joy captured in pixels. Vanessa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. She studied the photo for 3 seconds that stretched into infinity, then handed the phone back. Her tone shifted from warm to careful, the kind of careful people used when they were about to hurt you but wanted to seem kind doing it. She asked about Sophie's mother. Marcus gave her the practiced answer. Jennifer died 6 years ago, ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. 14 months from diagnosis to funeral. Sophie barely remembered her. Vanessa made sympathetic noises. Then she checked her phone, looked at him with something that might have been pity or might have been relief. The words came out flat, rehearsed. "You're really sweet, Marcus, but I don't think I'm ready for a ready-made family. You're just not my type." She stood before he could respond. Left cash for her untouched wine on the table, a $20 bill, more than the drink cost, as if paying extra could somehow soften the rejection. Then she walked out into the Christmas-lit streets of Boston without looking back. Marcus sat frozen, the familiar humiliation washing over him in waves. Around him, the restaurant buzzed with holiday cheer, couples leaning close over candlelit tables, groups of friends laughing over shared plates. He was an island of failure in a sea of connection. His hands trembled as he reached for his wallet. Time to go home, crawl into bed, pretend this evening never happened. In the morning, Sophie would ask how his date went, and he'd lie the way he always did. "It was fine, sweetheart, just didn't work out." He stood pulling on his coat. That's when the voice cut through the ambient noise, clear and calm, with an edge of something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Desperation, maybe, or determination. "Excuse me, would you consider being my husband?" Marcus turned, certain he had misheard. The woman sat at the adjacent table, facing him directly. She was striking in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty and everything to do with presence. Dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Eyes that assessed him with the same intensity he used when analyzing balance sheets for hidden fraud. Late 30s, he guessed. The kind of woman who belonged in corner offices, not casual riverside restaurants on Christmas night. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I'm sorry, what? No smile crossed her face. No hint that this might be a joke. I asked if you would consider being my husband. I'm serious. The room seemed to tilt. Marcus glanced around looking for hidden cameras, friends playing a cruel prank. Nothing. Just this stranger studying him like he was a particularly interesting puzzle. I don't understand. The woman, cool, composed, utterly unreadable, gestured toward the empty chair across from Marcus's abandoned table. I heard everything. Your date, what she said about not being ready for your daughter. Heat crawled up Marcus's neck. Bad enough to be rejected. Worse to have a witness. Look, I appreciate whatever this is, but I need to go. Wait. She stood in one fluid motion. Not desperate, despite what he'd thought. Just firm. Used to being obeyed. I'm serious about my question. Marcus froze, one arm halfway into his coat sleeve. Really looked at her for the first time. Mid-30s, he revised. Expensive watch. Cartier, he thought, though he only knew that because Jennifer had once pointed one out in a magazine. Everything about her screamed success, from the tailored cut of her suit to the way she held herself, spine straight, shoulders back, authority worn as naturally as skin, and she was asking him to marry her. You're insane, he said flatly. The corner of her mouth quirked up, not quite a smile. Probably, but I'm also very alone, and so are you. The words hit harder than they should have. 6 years. 6 years since Jennifer's funeral, since he'd stood in Mount Auburn Cemetery and promised her gravestone he'd take care of their daughter. 6 years of frozen dinners and parent-teacher conferences he attended alone. 6 years of being both mother and father, falling short at both. This woman didn't know any of that, couldn't know, but something in her eyes suggested she understood loneliness in her own way. Sit down, she continued, her voice losing its edge. Let me buy you dinner. 5 minutes of your time. If you still think I'm crazy after that, you can leave. Every instinct screamed at Marcus to walk away. This was how horror movies started. Stranger makes bizarre proposal, protagonist ignores red flags, ends up dismembered in a basement. But there was something in her expression that stopped him. Not pity, which he'd learned to spot from 50 paces. Something more like recognition, like seeing your own reflection in a stranger's eyes. He sat back down. She signaled the waiter without breaking eye contact, ordered wine for both of them without asking his preference. When the server retreated, she folded her hands on the table with the precision of someone used to boardroom negotiations. My family has been pressuring me to get married for 3 years. They parade eligible men in front of me at every holiday dinner like I'm supposed to pick one off a shelf at Whole Foods. Marcus said nothing, waited. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Every man I've dated only wanted 2 things, my money or my connections. I built my company from nothing. And now that it's successful, everyone wants a piece. Nobody wants me. The waiter returned with wine. She picked up her glass but didn't drink, just held it like a prop. I want a family, a real one, not a transaction disguised as romance, just people who actually care about each other. Marcus recognized that ache in her voice, the yearning for something whole. Why me? I heard you talking before your date arrived. You told the bartender your daughter drew you a picture of a reindeer this morning, that she's learning about Rudolph in school and thinks he's the best character because he's different, and that makes him special. Marcus blinked. He had said that to the bartender who'd made sympathetic noises while pouring his beer. 15 minutes before Vanessa showed up. I can't have children. The words came out flat, stripped of emotion. Medical condition, irreversible. When I told my ex-fiancé, he called off the wedding, said he wanted a real family. Anger flared hot in Marcus's chest. That's horrible. It is, but it's also reality. She set down her wine glass with careful precision. You have a daughter who needs a mother figure. I want to be a mother, but physically cannot. You keep getting rejected for having a child. I keep getting rejected for not being able to produce them. She leaned forward slightly. What if we helped each other? Not a fairy tale, a partnership, A practical arrangement that could become something real. Marcus stared at her. She was serious, completely, utterly serious. I don't know anything about you, not even your name. Elena Hartwell. I'm CEO of Technova Solutions. We do cybersecurity software for financial institutions. Started the company 11 years ago in my garage. Now we have 220 employees and 47 million in revenue. She recited the facts like items on a grocery list. I'm 37. I grew up in Boston, Back Bay specifically. My parents are difficult. I have no siblings. I like Thai food and documentaries about space. I hate small talk and people who chew with their mouths open. Despite everything, Marcus felt his lips twitch toward a smile. Marcus Chen, 44, forensic accountant at Morrison & Associates. I catch people who steal from their own companies. I have a daughter, Sophie, who's 7. She loves art and hates broccoli. My wife died 6 years ago from ovarian cancer. I've been alone ever since. Elena nodded slowly, as if he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. I looked you up while you were waiting for your date. Morrison & Associates has a solid reputation. You personally led the audit that uncovered the embezzlement scheme at Berkshire Manufacturing 2 years ago. Saved the company $12 million. Marcus's eyebrows rose. She'd done her homework. You researched me? I make 6-figure decisions every day. You think I'd approach someone without doing basic due diligence? She pulled a manila envelope from the leather bag at her feet, slid it across the table. Prenuptial agreement. I had my lawyer draft a template 6 months ago when I first considered this approach. Never found anyone worth using it on. Until tonight. Marcus opened the envelope with hands that didn't quite feel like his own. Inside, 20 pages of legal language, but the terms were straightforward. Separate finances, no claim to her company or assets. Provisions for Sophie's education and healthcare. Dissolution terms if either party wanted out after 2 years. It was the most romantic yet unromantic thing he'd ever seen. You've been planning this. Not a question. I'm a CEO. I plan everything. Elena's expression softened fractionally. But I've been alone for 4 years, Marcus. Since Bradford, my ex, ended things. I'm tired of being alone. Tired of my parents setting me up with men who see dollar signs instead of a person. Tired of feeling like I'm incomplete because my body won't cooperate with societal expectations. She met his eyes directly. And I think you're tired too. Tired of rejection. Tired of doing everything alone. Tired of your daughter asking for something you can't give her. Marcus's throat closed. This morning, before he'd made Sophie's favorite chocolate chip pancakes, before he'd driven her to school and promised tonight's date would go well, she'd asked him one simple question. Daddy, why don't I have a mommy like the other kids? He hadn't known how to answer, still didn't. This is insane, he said, but the words lacked conviction. Elena signaled the waiter again. Let's eat, get to know each other. You can give us your answer after dessert. They ordered. Elena asked about Sophie, what she liked, what she struggled with, what made her laugh. Marcus found himself talking more than he had in months, maybe years, about Sophie's talent for drawing, how she could lose herself for hours with just paper and colored pencils. About the time she tried to give their neighbor's dog a bath and flooded the backyard. About parent-teacher conferences where he sat alone among couples and felt like an imposter. Elena listened with focused intensity, asking follow-up questions that showed she was actually processing the information rather than just being polite. She didn't look at her phone once. When Marcus asked about her company, Elena's eyes lit up in a way they hadn't before. She explained how she'd identified a gap in the market for mid-sized banks that couldn't afford enterprise-level security but needed better protection than off-the-shelf solutions. How she'd taught herself to code at night while working a day job as a junior analyst. How the first 3 years had been brutal, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on ramen, maxing out credit cards to make payroll. My parents told me I was throwing my life away. My father said I should have gone to law school like he wanted. My mother said no man would want a woman who works 70-hour weeks. Elena's expression hardened. They cut me off financially when I refused to quit. Said I needed to learn about consequences. Did you? I learned that I'm better off without their money, and that the people who love you shouldn't put conditions on that love. She paused. which is why I haven't spoken to them in 3 years. Not since they made it clear I was a disappointment for not being married with children by 35. The waiter cleared their plates, brought dessert, creme brulee that neither of them touched. Lena pulled out her phone, set it on the table between them. Put your number in, let me meet Sophie. Let's see if this insane idea could actually work. Marcus's hands trembled as he picked up the phone. This was crazy. Absolute madness. You didn't marry strangers because you were both lonely. That's not how functional relationships worked. But then again, traditional dating wasn't working either. 12 failures in 2 years. How many more rejections before he gave up entirely? Before Sophie stopped asking about why she didn't have a mother? Before he turned into one of those bitter single parents who'd convinced themselves they were better off alone? He typed in his number, handed the phone back. Elena's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. Relief, maybe. Or hope. I mean it. I want to meet Sophie. I want to see if we can build something real out of this practical arrangement. Why are you doing this? Marcus asked one more time, needing to understand. Really? Elena stood, gathering her bag and coat. She looked down at him, and for just a moment, the CEO mask slipped entirely. Underneath was raw vulnerability, the kind that comes from too many nights spent alone in empty apartments. Because I'm tired of being alone, and because when I heard you talk about your daughter this evening, the love in your voice, the pride, I thought, that's what family sounds like. That's what I want. She left cash on the table to cover both meals, more than enough. Then she walked toward the exit, pausing just before the door. Think about it, Marcus, but don't take too long. Loneliness has a way of making us settle for less than we deserve. Then she was gone, disappearing into the Christmas lights and winter darkness. Marcus sat alone at the table, staring at the text message that had already appeared on his phone. This is Elena. Call me when you're ready. For the first time in 6 years, he felt something other than resignation, something dangerous and terrifying and impossible to ignore. Hope. 3 days passed. Marcus didn't call. Monday morning began at 5:30, same as always. He made breakfast for Sophie, scrambled eggs, toast with too much butter, the way she liked it, orange juice in her favorite cup with the faded Disney princess, packed her lunch while she ate, making sure to include the string cheese she'd begged for and the apple slices he knew she'd trade away, drove her to Somerville Elementary by 7:15, watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing, purple coat bright against the gray morning. Then the real day started. 45 minutes on the Red Line to downtown crossing, packed shoulder to shoulders with commuters who avoided eye contact. Up to the offices of Morrison and Associates on the 14th floor of a building that had been modern in 1985 and hadn't updated since. His desk was in a cluster of 5 cubicles, gray fabric walls that absorbed sound and hope in equal measure. Spreadsheets, always spreadsheets. Today it was the preliminary audit for Newton Energy, a mid-sized company in Waltham that wanted to go public in 18 months. Marcus's job was finding the problems before the SEC did, tracking every expense, every asset, every liability, looking for patterns that didn't fit, numbers that were too clean, transactions that happened at convenient times. He was good at it, had a knack for seeing what other accountants missed. But it was also mind-numbing work, hour after hour of comparing figures, building models, testing assumptions. The kind of work that lets your mind wander if you weren't careful. Marcus's mind wandered to Elena. He'd been thinking about her constantly for 3 days. The proposal, the prenup, the complete insanity of what she'd suggested. Marriage to a stranger because they were both lonely and could solve each other's problems. It sounded like the premise of a bad romantic comedy, not real life. Except Elena hadn't seemed like someone who dealt in fantasies. She'd been direct, practical, almost clinical in her assessment of their situation. No promises of love or passion, just a partnership that might possibly become something more. Marcus pulled up his personal spreadsheet during lunch, the one he kept in a password-protected file where he tracked every dollar of his life. The numbers told their own brutal story. Monthly income after taxes, $4,200. Rent, $2,400. After-school care for Sophie, $800. Utilities, $200. car payment and insurance, 300, groceries, 600, everything else, clothes, entertainment, unexpected expenses, whatever was left. He was saving roughly $400 a month. At that rate, he'd have enough for a down payment on a modest house in 17 years. Sophie would be graduated from college by then, assuming he could afford to send her to college at all. His current savings, $12,000, would cover maybe one semester at UMass, two if she lived at home. The partner track Ted Morrison kept dangling would help. Senior accountant made $90,000 base, plus bonuses. But partner track also meant 60-hour weeks, weekend work, constant travel. How was he supposed to do that while raising Sophie alone? His phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. Did you call her? Marcus deleted the message without responding. His sister had been hounding him since Christmas, wanting details about the mystery woman he'd mentioned in passing. He hadn't told her about Elena's proposal. Couldn't, because saying it out loud would make it real, and then he'd have to actually decide whether he was desperate enough or crazy enough to consider it. The afternoon dragged. At 5:30, Marcus packed up and headed back to Somerville, picking Sophie up from extended care at 6. She climbed into the back seat, chattering about her day. They'd learned about the solar system and science. She'd traded her apple slices for cookies at lunch. Her friend Emma had invited her to a birthday party next month at some place called Pump It Up. Marcus drove on autopilot, making appropriate noises at appropriate times, while Sophie's voice washed over him. She was happy, healthy, well-adjusted, according to her teacher. But she was also 7, and 7-year-olds couldn't see what was missing from their lives until they compared themselves to others. How long before Sophie realized that everyone else had 2 parents? How long before she started to resent him for not giving her that? Home by 6:30, dinner was spaghetti with sauce from a jar, salad from a bag, garlic bread from the freezer. They ate at the small kitchen table while Sophie told him about a book her teacher had read, something about a girl who could talk to animals. Marcus listened with half his attention, the other half running calculations. If he married Elena, Sophie would have a mother figure. Stability, maybe even private school if Elena's company was as successful as she'd claimed. College would be covered. Sophie would grow up with opportunities Marcus could never provide alone. But at what cost? Marrying someone he didn't know, didn't love, might never love. Living a lie. Teaching Sophie that relationships were transactions rather than connections. After dinner, Sophie worked on homework at the kitchen table while Marcus cleaned up. Then bath time, story time, tucking her into bed with the stuffed rabbit that had been her security blanket since she was 2. He sat on the edge of her mattress, brushing hair back from her forehead. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice was small in the darkness. "Yeah, sweetheart? Do you think Santa could bring me a mommy for next Christmas?" Marcus's chest tightened. "I don't think Santa works that way, kiddo." "Why not? Emma got a new mommy. Her daddy got married last year." "That's different. Emma's dad, he met someone. Can't you meet someone?" Sophie looked up at him with Jennifer's eyes, dark, direct, seeing more than a 7-year-old should. "You go on dates sometimes." "I do. It just hasn't worked out yet." "Is it because of me?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Do the ladies not like you because you have me?" Every parent fears the moment when their child's perception becomes too sharp, when innocence gives way to understanding. This was that moment. Marcus could lie, could reassure her that wasn't true, but Sophie was smart enough to know he'd be lying. Some people aren't ready for kids. That's about them, not you. "But if I wasn't here, you could find someone." "Hey," Marcus cupped her face gently, "don't ever think that. You're the best thing in my life. Anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve to be in our family." Sophie nodded, but her expression suggested she didn't quite believe him. She burrowed under her covers, turning toward the wall. "Night, Daddy." "Good night, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too." Marcus retreated to the living room, sank onto the couch that had come with the rental, pulled out his phone. Elena's message stared back at him from 3 days ago. He almost called, finger hovering over the contact. Then he closed the phone and picked up the television remote instead. Tuesday was worse. Sophie woke up with a fever, 101 degrees, cheeks flushed, complaining of a sore throat. Marcus called in sick to work, something he could only do 3 times a year without using vacation days he was saving for Sophie's spring break. Spent the day monitoring her temperature, feeding her popsicles, letting her watch more television than he usually allowed. By afternoon, she'd fallen asleep on the couch, and Marcus sat in the kitchen reviewing his personal finances again. Ran projections. If he got promoted to senior accountant, maxed out his 401k contributions, kept expenses exactly where they were. Sophie might graduate from college with $20,000 in student loans. Manageable but not ideal. If he married Elena, Sophie would graduate debt-free. More than that, she'd have access to opportunities Marcus couldn't even imagine. Art classes at the Museum of Fine Arts, summer camps that cost thousands, a college fund that would cover Harvard if she wanted it. All it would paint was his pride, his independence, his belief that he could do this alone. His phone rang. Rachel. "You've been avoiding me," his sister said without preamble. "Sophie's sick. I've been busy." "Bullshit. What happened with the mystery woman?" Rachel had the persistence of a good trial attorney, which she was. 46 years old, divorced 2 years ago after her husband decided he preferred his paralegal. She'd rebuilt her life and now spent her free time trying to fix Marcus's. Nothing happened. It was just a strange conversation. Strange how? Marcus hesitated. Rachel was his closest confidant, had been since they were kids growing up in Quincy, sharing a bedroom because their parents couldn't afford anything bigger. She'd loaned him money when Jennifer got sick and the medical bills piled up. She'd sat with him at the funeral when he couldn't stop crying. She'd held Sophie while he fell apart. If anyone would understand, it would be Rachel. She asked me to marry her. Silence on the line, then, "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus explained. The whole surreal encounter, Elena's proposal, the prenup, her reasons. When he finished, Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "Are you considering it?" "I don't know, it's insane. It's practical." Rachel's lawyer brain kicked in. "Honestly, Marcus, it's not that different from how wealthy families used to arrange marriages. Strategic alliances, mutual benefit. That was centuries ago. Please, it still happens in some circles. And this woman, Elena, she's being honest about what she wants. No pretense of love. No false expectations. Just two people helping each other out." What about Sophie? What about her? She'd gain a mother figure, financial security, opportunities you can't provide. Seems like she'd benefit most. Marcus rubbed his eyes. "And what do I tell her, that Daddy married a stranger because it made economic sense? You tell her you found someone who cares about both of you, who wants to be part of your family." Rachel's voice softened. "Marcus, you're a great father, but you're also exhausted. I can hear it in your voice. How long can you keep this up? Working full-time, raising Sophie alone, trying to date? Something has to give. So I should just marry this woman. I'm saying you should at least meet her again. Let her meet Sophie. See if there's potential for something real. You might be surprised." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the quiet house, listening to Sophie's congested breathing from the living room. Rachel had a point. He was exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-level tired in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying everything alone for too long. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe this insane idea could actually work. Wednesday evening, after Sophie was asleep, Marcus called. Elena answered on the second ring. "You're overthinking this." Despite everything, Marcus almost laughed. "How do you know?" "Because I've been doing the same thing. I almost deleted your number twice." A pause. "I'm scared too, Marcus. This isn't easy for me either. I have a daughter. She's been through enough losing her mother. I can't bring someone into her life unless I'm sure." "You'll never be sure. That's not how life works. But staying alone because you're afraid of failure? That's not protecting Sophie. That's protecting yourself." The words stung because they were true. Marcus had been telling himself he was keeping Sophie safe by avoiding relationships. But really he was avoiding the possibility of rejection, of loss, of having to grieve again. "Saturday," he heard himself say, "there's a park near my house. Lexington Common, 10 in the morning. I'll be there." Marcus hung up and sat in the darkness of his bedroom, wondering if he just made the best decision of his life or the worst. Saturday arrived too fast. Marcus made Sophie's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes, the recipe Jennifer had taught him in their first apartment, back when they were young and broke and stupidly happy. He'd perfected them over 6 years of practice. Crispy edges, fluffy center, chocolate melted just right. Sophie ate 3, getting syrup on her chin, chattering about the new art supplies her teacher had given her. Real colored pencils, not the cheap ones. Marcus watched her, memorizing the moment. Whatever happened today, their life was about to change. "We're meeting someone at the park," he said, trying to sound casual. "A friend of mine." Sophie looked up, suspicious. At 7, she'd already learned that adults rarely told the whole truth. "What kind of friend?" "Her name is Elena. She's someone I met recently. She wants to meet you." "Is she your girlfriend?" "No." Then, because honesty mattered, "Not exactly. She's just someone I'm getting to know." Sophie processed this, syrup dripping from her fork. "Okay, can I bring my sketchbook?" "Of course." They drove to Lexington Common, the park where Marcus brought Sophie most weekends when the weather cooperated. 20 minutes from home, big enough to run around, with a pond that attracted ducks year-round. Sophie loved the ducks, bought stale bread with her allowance to feed them even though the sign said not to. Elena was already there, sitting on a bench near the pond. But she'd transformed. Gone was the severe suit and corporate armor. Instead, jeans that looked expensive but casual, a navy sweater, winter boots. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves. Less CEO, more human. She stood as they approached, and Marcus saw genuine nervousness in her expression. Good, at least he wasn't the only one terrified. "Elena, this is Sophie. Sophie, this is Elena." Sophie studied Elena with the brutal honesty of children. "Hi, you're pretty." Elena smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way it hadn't at the restaurant. "Thank you, you're pretty too. I love your coat." "It's purple, that's my favorite color." Sophie held up the bag of bread. "I'm going to feed the ducks. Do you want to come?" "I'd love to." They walked toward the pond, Sophie running ahead while Marcus and Elena followed at a distance. The December air was cold but not brutal, temperature hovering around 30 degrees. Marcus shoved his hands in his pockets, hyper-aware of Elena beside him. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "Thank you for calling." Elena watched Sophie scatter breadcrumbs, her expression unreadable. "She looks like you." "She has her mother's eyes." "I know." Elena glanced at him. "I mean, I assumed. You mentioned your wife was—" "I'm sorry. That must have been awful." "It was. Still is sometimes." Marcus surprised himself with the honesty. "I loved Jennifer. We were high school sweethearts, got married young, had Sophie right away. When she got sick, it felt like the universe was punishing me for being too happy." Elena was quiet for a moment. "My mother died when I was 12. Car accident. I spent years angry at the universe too." "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But her voice carried old pain. "My father remarried 4 years later. I hated my stepmother at first, thought she was trying to replace my mom. But Catherine was patient. Eventually I realized she wasn't replacing anyone. She was just adding something new." Marcus understood the implication. "Is that what you think you'd be doing? With Sophie?" "I don't know what I'd be doing. I've never been a mother, never been around children much." Elena's vulnerability showed through. "I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that Sophie will hate me, that I'll prove my ex-fiancé right, that I'm incomplete." "You're not incomplete." "Try telling my parents that." Bitterness crept into her tone. "Actually, don't. They'll probably agree with Bradford." Sophie ran back, eyes bright. "There's a really fat duck. Come see." She grabbed Elena's hand without hesitation, pulling her toward the water. Elena let herself be led, glancing back at Marcus with an expression that might have been panic or might have been joy. Marcus followed, watching his daughter and this stranger who wanted to be part of their lives. The duck was indeed fat, puffed up against the cold. Sophie named him Duke because he's fancy, and insisted on giving him extra bread. Elena laughed at something Sophie said, and the sound was genuine, unforced. Not the practiced laugh of someone trying to win over a child, but real amusement. They stayed at the park for 2 hours. Sophie showed Elena her sketchbook, the drawings she'd been working on, animals mostly, with some portraits of Marcus that were surprisingly accurate. Elena praised her technique, asked questions that showed she was actually looking at the art, not just being polite. When Sophie asked if Elena could draw, Elena admitted she was terrible at it. Sophie immediately offered to teach her. They sat on a bench, Sophie explaining principles of shading and perspective that seemed advanced for a second grader, while Marcus stood nearby and watched his life potentially transform. Finally, Sophie got cold. "Can we go home? My fingers are freezing." "Of course," Marcus turned to Elena. "Do you want to—" He stopped. Inviting her to their house felt like crossing a line. "Come over," Elena finished. "If that's okay with Sophie." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "You can see my room. I have 100 drawings on my wall." "Probably closer to 50, Marcus corrected, but he was smiling. "Okay, follow us." The drive back to Somerville felt surreal. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror, seeing Elena's Tesla behind his decade-old Honda Civic. The contrast couldn't be more stark. His life versus hers, poverty versus wealth. But she'd chosen to follow him anyway. His rental house looked shabbier than usual through Elena's eyes. One-story ranch, gray siding that needed repainting, a small front yard with grass he kept neatly trimmed but couldn't make lush. Inside, furniture he'd bought used on Craigslist, carpet worn in high-traffic areas, walls decorated with Sophie's artwork because he couldn't afford anything else. Elena stepped inside and didn't flinch. Just looked around with genuine interest, studying the photos on the mantel. Sophie at various ages, a few of Jennifer and Marcus from before, back when they'd been young and in love. "She was beautiful," Elena said softly, looking at a wedding photo. Marcus's throat tightened. "Yeah, she was." Sophie grabbed Elena's hand again. "Come see my room." The house was small enough that Sophie's room was visible from the living room, a converted office barely big enough for a twin bed and dresser. But Sophie had made it her kingdom. Drawings covered every surface. On the walls, the dresser, taped to the closet door. A rainbow explosion of color and creativity. Elena stood in the doorway, taking it all in. "Wow. I like to draw," Sophie said proudly. "I can see that. These are incredible, Sophie. You have real talent." "My teacher says I should take art classes, but Daddy says they're expensive." Marcus winced. He'd explained that private art instruction cost money they didn't have, but Sophie had apparently internalized it as him not thinking she was worth the investment. Elena knelt down to Sophie's eye level. "Have you ever tried watercolors?" "No, are they fun?" "They can be. They're also tricky, but I bet you'd be amazing at them." Elena glanced up at Marcus. "My stepmother teaches watercolor classes at the Museum of Fine Arts. For kids. If you're interested, I could ask about enrollment." "Elena, we can't," Marcus started. "I'm not offering to pay, just offering to ask about it. Whether you enroll is up to you." The careful phrasing, not imposing, just providing information. Marcus found himself nodding. They stayed for an hour. Elena sat on Sophie's floor, letting a 7-year-old teach her how to draw. Her rabbit looked more like a deformed potato, which made Sophie laugh until she couldn't breathe. Marcus stood in the doorway watching, feeling something crack open in his chest. When Elena finally said she needed to leave, Sophie hugged her. Not a quick, polite hug. A real one, arms wrapped tight, head against Elena's stomach. "Can you come back?" Sophie asked. Elena looked at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded. "If your dad says it's okay, I'd love to come back." "Daddy? Can she?" "Yes, sweetheart, she can come back." After Elena left, after Sophie went to bed still talking excitedly about her new friend who couldn't draw, Marcus sat alone in the living room. His phone buzzed. Text from Elena. "Thank you for today. Sophie is wonderful. You're doing an amazing job raising her." Marcus stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for coming. She really liked you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and appeared again. Finally, "I really liked her too, and you. Would it be okay if I came back next Saturday?" "Yes, that would be okay." "Good. See you then." Marcus set down his phone and let himself feel it, the dangerous, terrifying thing he had been trying to avoid. Hope that this insane idea might actually work, that Elena might become part of their lives, that Sophie might finally have what she'd been asking for, that Marcus might not have to do this alone anymore. The next 8 Saturdays established a pattern. Elena arrived at 10, dressed in jeans and sweaters, her CEO armor left at home. Sometimes they went to parks, other times museums. Once to the New England Aquarium, where Sophie pressed her face against the glass and named all the fish while Elena stood beside her, listening with genuine interest. Marcus watched them grow comfortable with each other. Watched Sophie's initial shyness transform into easy affection. Watched Elena stop asking permission before making suggestions, start offering opinions about Sophie's drawings, begin to understand the rhythm of their small family. It wasn't romantic, not really. More like practice, rehearsal for the roles they might play. But small moments accumulated into something larger. Elena's laugh when Sophie told terrible knock-knock jokes. The way she crouched down to Sophie's eye level when talking to her, giving her full attention. How she remembered Sophie's favorite color, her favorite food, the names of her classroom friends. One Saturday in late February, they attempted to bake cookies. Elena admitted she'd never baked anything in her life. Her family had always had a chef. Marcus walked her through the recipe Jennifer used to make, the one printed on the back of the chocolate chip bag. They measured ingredients wrong, forgot to set a timer, ended up with cookies that were charred on the edges and raw in the middle. Sophie thought it was hilarious. Elena laughed until she cried. Marcus ordered pizza and felt something shift in his chest, some wall he'd built crumbling. Another Saturday, they went ice skating at Boston Commons Frog Pond. Elena couldn't skate, kept falling, clutching the wall like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Sophie and Marcus each took one of her hands, pulling her around the rink while she wobbled and laughed and swore she was going to break something. When Elena finally managed 3 consecutive strides without falling, Sophie cheered like Elena had won the Olympics. Elena's smile, pure joy, unguarded, made Marcus's heart skip. After, when Sophie ran ahead to the hot chocolate stand, Elena turned to Marcus. Thank you. For what? For this, for letting me be part of it. Her gloved hand brushed his. I haven't been this happy in, I can't remember how long. Marcus looked at her, really looked, saw past the CEO, past the carefully constructed competence, to the lonely woman underneath who just wanted to belong somewhere. Me either, he admitted. Their hands stayed touching, just fingers through winter gloves, barely any contact at all, but it felt like a promise. The evening Sophie got sick changed everything. A Tuesday in early March. Marcus got the call from school. Sophie had a fever, needed to be picked up. He left work early, brought her home, watched her temperature climb to 102. He texted Elena, Sophie's sick, can't make Saturday. Her response came within minutes. I can come help. You don't have to do that. You have work. I'm the CEO. I can work from anywhere. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus should have said no. This wasn't part of their arrangement. Elena wasn't obligated to play nurse to his sick kid. But he was exhausted, worried, and the thought of not handling this alone was too tempting to resist. Elena arrived with soup from a restaurant in Cambridge, medicine Sophie actually liked, and a stuffed animal Marcus hadn't asked her to bring. She sat with Sophie while Marcus tried to work from his laptop at the kitchen table, answering emails he couldn't focus on. At some point, Marcus looked up to find Sophie asleep on the couch, head in Elena's lap. Elena had her laptop balanced precariously on the arm of the couch, typing one-handed while the other stroked Sophie's hair. She glanced up, saw Marcus watching, and smiled. Something inside Marcus broke open. Or maybe healed. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. That evening, after Sophie's fever broke and she was sleeping peacefully in her room, Marcus and Elena sat at his small kitchen table with coffee. Neither of them was drinking. Can I ask you something? Elena's voice was quiet. Sure. Do you think about her when I'm here? Your wife? Marcus had known this question would come eventually. Didn't make it easier to answer. Yes, Elena nodded, accepting. Does it bother you that I'm here? Sometimes. Honesty felt important. Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying her, like I'm trying to replace her. You can't replace someone who was loved, Marcus. Love doesn't work that way. My head knows that. My heart isn't always convinced. Elena reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. My mother died when I was 12. Car accident on Road 2. She hit black ice, went off the road. Died instantly. Marcus hadn't known. I'm sorry. My father was devastated. For 3 years, he barely functioned. Then he met Catherine, my stepmother now. I hated her at first. Screamed at my father that he was betraying my mother. Said horrible things to Catherine's face. What changed? One night I found Catherine crying in the kitchen. I asked why, Ma. She said, because I'll never be your mother, and I wish I could be. Not to replace her. No one could. But to love you the way she would have wanted. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I realized Catherine wasn't trying to erase my mother. She was just trying to add new love to the space my mother left behind. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. That's what you're doing. Trying to add something new. I'm not trying to be Jennifer. I couldn't be, even if I wanted to. I'm just trying to be part of your lives, if you'll let me. Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. He nodded instead. Elena squeezed his hand. I need you to know something. This started as a practical arrangement, a transaction, but it's not that anymore, not for me. What is it? I'm falling in love with Sophie, and I think, she took a shaky breath, I think I'm falling in love with you too. The world seemed to stop. Marcus stared at her, this woman who'd walked into his life 3 months ago with an insane proposal, who'd met his daughter, baked terrible cookies, learned to ice skate, sat with them through illness and ordinary Saturdays, who'd somehow become essential. This wasn't supposed to happen, he said. I know. We were supposed to keep it practical, transactional. I know. But I can't. Marcus's voice broke. I can't keep it practical anymore. Because somewhere along the way, I started falling for you too. Elena's breath caught. Really? Really? You're brilliant and kind and terrible at drawing. You make Sophie laugh. You make me feel like maybe I don't have to carry everything alone. And that terrifies me. It terrifies me too. Elena stood, came around the table. Marcus stood to meet her. They faced each other across 3 feet of kitchen linoleum, across the gulf of everything that separated them. Wealth and poverty, success and struggle, her future and his past. Then Elena closed the distance, and Marcus met her halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of coffee and possibility. Elena's hand came up to cup his face, and Marcus pulled her closer, feeling her warmth against him. It wasn't passionate or desperate. It was gentle, careful. The kiss of 2 people who'd been lonely too long and were terrified of breaking something precious. When they pulled apart, both were trembling. What do we do now? Elena whispered. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. She rested her forehead against his. Me too. 2 weeks later, Elena brought it up, meeting her parents. They were at Marcus's house, Sophie occupied with a new sketchbook Elena had brought. Marcus and Elena sat at the kitchen table, and he watched her steel herself for the conversation. I think it's time you and Sophie met my parents. Marcus's stomach dropped. Are you sure that's a good idea? No, but we can't avoid them forever. If this is going to work, really work, they need to know about you. What have you told them? That I'm seeing someone, that it's serious. Elena's jaw tightened. I haven't mentioned Sophie yet. Warning bells clanged in Marcus's head. Why not? I wanted them to meet you both first, to see how good this is before they start judging. Judging? Marcus's voice went flat. Elena, what aren't you telling me? She looked away. My parents have certain expectations. They won't understand at first, but once they see us together, how happy I am, they'll come around. Will they? Marcus heard the bitterness in his own voice. I'm a mid-level accountant who rents a house in Somerville and raises someone else's kid. What exactly is there for them to understand? Don't, Elena's tone sharpened. Don't diminish yourself. I'm not. I'm being realistic about how they'll see me. He leaned back. You grew up in a mansion in Back Bay. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Quincy, sharing a room with my sister until I was 16. We're from different worlds, Elena. I don't care what world you're from, but your parents will. Elena's silence was answer enough. Marcus rubbed his eyes. When? Friday night, dinner at their house. She reached for his hand. I'll be right there. I won't let them hurt you or Sophie. It was a promise she couldn't keep, and they both knew it. Marcus spent the next 3 days preparing. Wednesday, he went to Macy's and bought a suit. Charcoal gray, on sale, but still $320, nearly a week's pay after taxes. The sales associate asked if it was for a special occasion. Marcus said he was meeting his girlfriend's parents. The man's sympathetic grimace said everything. Thursday evening, Marcus sat Sophie down for a talk. Remember Elena, how we've been spending Saturdays with her? Sophie nodded, coloring at the kitchen table. She wants us to meet her mom and dad. We're going to have dinner at their house tomorrow. Sophie looked up. Crayon paused. Are they nice? Marcus chose his words carefully. They're formal. They have a very big house. There will be fancy food and a lot of forks. I need you to use your best manners, okay? Okay, why do we have to go? Because Elena's family is important to her, and we're important to Elena. So we're like her family now? The question pierced Marcus. Kind of. We're trying to be. Does that mean Elena is my mom? Marcus's breath caught. They'd never explicitly discussed what Elena's role would be. Do you want her to be? Sophie considered this seriously. I think so. She's nice, and she doesn't mind that I can't draw as good as her. Elena can't draw at all, kiddo. Exactly, Sophie grinned. So we're perfect together. The logic of 7-year-olds. If only adult relationships were that simple. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Marcus, dressed in his new suit, helped Sophie into the dress they'd bought at Target, navy blue with white flowers, the nicest thing she owned. She looked so small and vulnerable that Marcus almost called the whole thing off. But Elena was already on her way. Too late to back out now. They drove to Back Bay in Marcus's Honda, following Elena's Tesla through streets that became progressively more expensive. Past brownstones and tree-lined avenues. Past buildings Marcus couldn't afford to look at, let alone live in. Finally stopping in front of a 3-story federal-style mansion that probably cost more than Marcus would earn in his entire life. Sophie pressed her face to the window. Daddy, is this a palace? No, sweetheart. Just a very big house. Elena lives here? She grew up here. She has her own place now. Sophie absorbed this, trying to reconcile the Elena who sat on their floor drawing with the Elena who came from this world. Elena met them at the door, looking nervous in a way Marcus had never seen her. She wore a dress he'd also never seen. Silk, probably designer, transforming her back into the CEO who'd first approached him. Her armor was on, protection against whatever was coming. Ready? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. No, Marcus admitted, but let's do this anyway. They climbed the steps to the front door. Elena's hand found his, squeezed once. The door opened. Catherine Hartwell stood there, blonde hair in a perfect bob, Chanel suit, pearls that cost more than Marcus's car. Her gaze swept over Marcus and Sophie with clinical precision, assessing, calculating, finding them wanting. Welcome, boy. The word was ice. Please, come in. Marcus took Sophie's hand and stepped into a world where they would never, ever belong. The foyer swallowed them. White Carrara marble stretched beneath their feet, reflecting the light from a baccarat chandelier that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a year. Sophie's shoes, polished Target specials, squeaked against the stone. The sound echoed in the cavernous space, announcing their inadequacy. Robert Hartwell emerged from what looked like a library, all mahogany and leather-bound books. 69 years old, silver hair slicked back, wearing a Tom Ford suit that fit like it had been sculpted onto his frame. His handshake was firm, assessing, the grip of a man used to measuring worth in seconds. Marcus Chen, Robert Hartwell. No warmth in his voice, just acknowledgement. And this must be Sophie. Sophie, to her credit, extended her small hand. Nice to meet you, sir. Robert's eyebrow rose fractionally. At least she had manners, small comfort in a tsunami of judgment. They moved to the dining room, another cathedral of wealth. The table could seat 12 easily, set tonight for 5 with china so delicate Marcus was afraid to breathe near it. 3 forks on the left, 2 knives on the right, 2 crystal glasses. Sophie stared at the place setting like it was a puzzle designed to humiliate her. Catherine appeared with wine, pouring without asking preferences. Her movements were practiced, effortless, the grace of someone who'd hosted 1,000 dinners for people more important than Marcus would ever be. Please sit. She gestured to seats clearly chosen to separate Marcus and Elena, placing Sophie between strangers. Strategic seating to divide and conquer. The first course arrived, caviar on blini. Sophie looked at the glistening black eggs with barely concealed horror. Marcus watched her take a small bite, her face carefully neutral, even as he knew she hated it. 7 years old and already learning to lie with her expression. That broke something in him. Robert started the interrogation disguised as small talk. Marcus, Elena mentioned you're an accountant. Yes, I work at Morrison and Associates. We handle mid-market audits and forensic accounting. Morrison. Robert swirled his wine. I don't believe I'm familiar. Are they a national firm? Regional, based in Boston, offices in Providence and Hartford. I see. The words dripped with dismissal. What did you study? Accounting and finance, UMass Boston. Another pause weighted with meaning. State school. Not a question. A categorization. Marcus felt Elena stiffen beside him, but kept his expression neutral. Full scholarship, graduated magna cum laude. Impressive, Catherine's tone suggested it wasn't. And you're raising Sophie alone? The shift was jarring, from Marcus's inadequacies to Sophie's existence as a problem to be solved. Yes, my wife passed away 6 years ago. How tragic. No emotion behind the words. Catherine turned to Sophie. And how old are you, dear? Sophie swallowed her water carefully. 7 3/4. 7. Such a formative age. Catherine's smile was surgical. You must need so much. Stability, structure, a proper family unit. Marcus's jaw clenched. She has those things. Does she? Robert leaned forward. A single father working full-time. No mother in the picture. That seems like a challenging environment for a young girl. Elena's voice cut through, sharp. Father, Sophie is thriving. She's talented, intelligent. I'm not questioning the child's abilities. Robert's interruption was smooth. I'm questioning whether one parent, working a demanding job with limited resources, can provide everything a child needs. The second course arrived, lobster bisque. Marcus had lost his appetite somewhere between the caviar and being told he was failing his daughter. Across the table, Sophie's eyes were too wide, too understanding. She was listening to every word, absorbing the subtext that she was the problem. Catherine pivoted with predatory grace. Marcus, I hope you don't mind me asking, what are your career prospects? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Professional territory, safer. I'm being considered for senior accountant, partner track in 3 to 5 years if I continue on my current trajectory. Partner, Robert's laugh was brief, cutting. What does that translate to in compensation? Father, Elena's voice rose. It's a fair question. Well, if Marcus is going to be part of this family, we need to understand his financial position. Robert turned back to Marcus, all pretense of politeness abandoned. Elena is worth, conservatively, $30 million. Her company is valued at $65 million. You understand our concern about intentions. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Marcus set down his spoon with deliberate care. I'm aware of the disparity, Mr. Hartwell. I didn't pursue Elena. She approached me. How convenient for you. Father, that's enough. Is it? Catherine's voice was quieter than her husband's, but no less lethal. We've worked very hard to build our family's position, Elena. Your success is something we're enormously proud of. But you have to understand our perspective. A man working a modest job with a child from a previous marriage, approaching our daughter. He didn't approach me. I approached him. Elena's words came out clipped. And Marcus has never asked me for anything. Not money, not connections, not help. He's been raising Sophie alone for 6 years, doing everything himself. Your best is admirable. Catherine turned to Marcus. But Elena deserves more than admirable. She deserves exceptional. Sophie's fork clattered against her plate. The sound cut through the tension like breaking glass. She stared at her hands, tears building. Marcus pushed back from the table. Sophie, get your coat. Marcus, Please. Elena reached for him. No. The word came out harder than he intended. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have brought her here. He stood, helped Sophie out of her chair. She was crying silently now, tears streaming down her face. Catherine opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus cut her off. My daughter is crying because you just spent the last hour telling her she's a burden, that her existence makes me inadequate, that she's the reason I can't be with Elena. His voice was controlled, lethal. We're leaving. Elena followed them to the foyer. Marcus, wait. Let me talk to them. They just need time. Time for what? To accept that I'm poor? That Sophie isn't their blood? He grabbed their coats from where a uniformed staff member had hung them. They made their position very clear. They're just protective. They're cruel. Marcus looked at her, saw the woman he had been falling for overlaid with this world she came from. And you brought us here knowing they would be. You knew they'd judge us, and you brought Sophie anyway. Elena's face crumpled. I thought they'd be different. I thought if they saw you, saw how good you are. Well, they saw. He finished buttoning Sophie's coat with shaking hands. And we're not good enough. We'll never be good enough for your world. From the dining room, Robert's voice carried, Elena, come back inside. Let them go. Elena looked torn between two worlds. Marcus made the decision for her. Goodbye, Elena. He walked out, Sophie's hand in his, leaving Elena standing alone in her parents' mansion. In the car, Sophie sobbed against her seatbelt. They hate me. They think I'm out. Marcus pulled to the side of Beacon Street, unable to drive while his daughter fell apart. He climbed into the back seat, pulled her into his arms. They don't hate you. They don't even know you. But they said you can't give me good things, that I make everything wrong. They're wrong, so wrong, Sophie. He held her tighter. You are the best thing in my life. You make everything right. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. Maybe the Hartwells were right. Maybe Sophie would be better off with a father who could provide more, who wasn't stretched, so thin he could barely hold it together. Maybe loving her wasn't enough. The drive home passed in silence. Sophie fell asleep against the window, exhausted from tears. Marcus carried her inside, tucked her into bed without changing her out of the dress. She stirred briefly. Is Elena gone? His throat closed. Yeah, sweetheart, probably. Forever? I don't know. Sophie turned toward the wall, pulled her rabbit close. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing evened out, then retreated to the living room. His phone lit up with Elena's calls. He declined them all. Text messages piled up. Apologies, explanations, pleas to talk. He deleted them without reading past the first lines. At 2 a.m, he sat on the floor of his living room in the dark, the weight of failure pressing down. He'd thought he could bridge the gap between their worlds. Thought love might be enough to overcome class differences that had existed for centuries. He'd been naive, stupid, and he'd dragged Sophie into the wreckage of his delusion. His phone rang. Rachel, he answered because ignoring her only made her more persistent. I've been calling for hours. What happened? Marcus told her. Every humiliating moment. When he finished, Rachel was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. Finally, you're an idiot? Thanks, really helpful. I'm serious, Marcus. You're being an idiot. Her lawyer voice, sharp and unforgiving. Those people were horrible. Agreed. They insulted you and Sophie. Absolutely unacceptable. So you left. Good. Necessary. Then why? Because you're not just running from them. You're running from Elena. You're using this as an excuse to bail on the relationship before you get hurt worse. Rachel's tone softened fractionally. Marcus, when Jenny was dying, what did she make you promise? His hands clenched. I don't want to talk about Jennifer. Too bad. What did she promise you to promise her? The memory surfaced like a drowning man gasping for air. Jennifer in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors and the smell of antiseptic, taking his hand with what little strength she had left, making him swear. She made me promise to be happy. His voice cracked. To not let her death make me afraid to live. And what are you doing right now? That's different. Is it? You found someone who loves you, who loves Sophie. The first time it got hard, you ran. Rachel's voice turned fierce. You think Jenny would want this? You think she'd want you teaching Sophie that when things get tough, you quit? I'm protecting Sophie. You're protecting yourself. Sophie doesn't need you to shield her from rejection. She needs you to show her how to stand up to it, how to fight for what matters. Rachel paused. You think honoring Jenny means staying miserable? You're wrong. Honoring her means being brave enough to choose happiness. Like she did, fighting for every day she had left with you. After Rachel hung up, Marcus sat in the silence of his house. Around him, evidence of the life he'd built alone. Sophie's drawings on the walls, Jennifer's photo on the mantle, furniture bought secondhand but kept carefully clean. A small life, a limited life, but his. Except it wasn't just his anymore. Sophie needed more than he could give, and he'd found someone willing to give it. Someone who'd spent months earning Sophie's trust, learning to be part of their world. Someone he'd pushed away because her parents were terrible and he was scared. He opened his phone, scrolled through Elena's messages. The first few were apologetic, then confused, then hurt. The last one, sent an hour ago. I understand if you don't want to see me again, but please don't punish Sophie for my parents' mistakes. She deserves better than losing someone else she loves. Marcus stared at the words until they blurred. Sophie had lost her mother at 14 months old. Now she'd lost Elena because Marcus was too proud and too scared to fight for them. Rachel was right. He was an idiot. Morning came with exhausted clarity. Marcus found Sophie already awake, sitting at the kitchen table without breakfast. Her sketchbook lay open but blank. She didn't look up when he entered. Sophie, sweetheart, I need to talk to you. She stayed quiet. Marcus sat across from her, choosing words carefully. I made a big mistake last night. When those people said mean things, I ran away. I thought I was protecting you. Sophie's eyes remained fixed on the empty page. But running away taught you the wrong lesson. It taught you that when things get hard, we give up. That when people say we're not good enough, we believe them. He reached across the table. That's not what I want you to learn. Sophie finally looked up. What should I learn? That being good enough isn't about money or big houses. It's about being kind and honest and loving. And Sophie, you are all those things. His voice steadied. You're smart and talented and compassionate. You're everything I could want in a daughter. Anyone who can't see that is wrong. What about Elena's parents? They're wrong. They don't know you. They saw you for an hour and made judgments based on things that don't matter. But we can't let them win by believing what they said. Sophie processed this with 7-year-old logic. So we should show them they're wrong. Do you want to? Even if it's hard? Even if they keep being mean? Her chin lifted, showing the stubborn determination she'd inherited from Jennifer. Yes, I want Elena back. I don't care about her mean parents. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. His daughter was braver than he was. Then we'll fight for her. Together. Promise? I promise. The words hung between them like a covenant. Sophie's hand found his across the table. Marcus called Elena that afternoon. She answered on the first ring, voice raw. Marcus? Can we meet? Just the two of us. I need to talk to you. Yes. Where? Your office? I don't want Sophie to see us until I know. Until we figure this out. 30 minutes later, Marcus stood in the lobby of Technova Solutions, feeling profoundly out of place among glass and chrome and people in expensive suits. The receptionist called up, and Elena appeared almost immediately. She looked terrible. Dark circles, hair pulled back severely, armor back in place. They didn't hug, didn't touch, just stood in the lobby while employees pretended not to stare. I'm sorry, Marcus's voice was low. I shouldn't have left like that. I was angry, but I took it out on you. Elena's composure cracked. They were horrible. I knew they might be judgmental, but I never imagined they'd be that cruel to Sophie. They're your parents. You wanted them to accept us. I wanted them to see what I see, that you're a good man, that Sophie is wonderful, that we could be a family. Her eyes filled. I told them off after you left. Told them they were wrong about everything. My father said I was throwing away my future. My mother said I was choosing a stranger over my family. What did you say? I said you weren't a stranger, that in 3 months You and Sophie had become more family to me than they'd been in years. Elena's voice broke. Then I left. Haven't spoken to them since. Marcus absorbed this. Elena had chosen them, had stood up to her parents, walked away from that world, and he'd pushed her away without giving her a chance to prove her choice. I'm scared. The admission cost him. Scared that your parents are right, that I can't give you what you deserve, that Sophie will grow up in your world always being reminded she doesn't belong. So we let them win? We give up because they're terrible people? No, we fight. Marcus stepped closer. But I need to know you're in this, really in this. Not just rebelling against your parents. Not looking for a family because they rejected you. I need to know you love Sophie and me enough to face judgment every holiday, every family event. Enough to choose us over and over. Elena closed the distance between them. I love Sophie. I've loved her since that first day at the park when she taught me to feed ducks. I love her laugh and her drawings and the way she explains things with complete confidence, even when she's wrong. Her hands found his. And I love you. I love how you make pancakes on Saturday morning and read her stories with different voices and work yourself exhausted to give her everything you can. I love your integrity and your kindness and how you see me as a person, not a bank account. My parents will never accept us. You need to understand that. Then they'll lose me because I'm choosing you. Elena's grip tightened. I'm choosing Sophie. I'm choosing this family we're building. I don't care what they think. Marcus pulled her against him, felt her shake with tears. Around them, the Technova lobby buzzed with activity, but it faded to background noise. Just them, holding each other, making promises in the wreckage of what they'd almost lost. Come home, he whispered, to us, where you belong. Elena pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can I, after everything? Sophie wants you back. She told me this morning she wants to fight for you. Marcus managed a smile. Turns out my 7-year-old is braver than I am. She gets that from you. No, she gets it from her mother. Jennifer would have fought your parents, would have told them exactly what she thought. His throat tightened. I think she'd like you. I think she'd be glad Sophie has you. Elena kissed him then, soft and certain, tasting of salt and promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling through tears. Take me home, Marcus, to my family. They drove separately, Elena following his Honda in her Tesla, the metaphor too obvious to ignore. But this time the distance between their cars felt bridgeable. This time they were heading toward the same destination. Sophie opened the door before Marcus could get his keys out, launched herself at Elena with enough force to nearly knock her over. You came back, Elena caught her, held tight. I came back, for good, if you'll have me. Forever? Forever. Elena met Marcus's eyes over Sophie's head. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to face whatever comes, together. Sophie pulled back, face serious. Even your mean parents. Even them. We'll show them what a real family looks like. They went inside, all three of them, finally complete. Marcus closed the door on the outside world and allowed himself to believe it. That this insane arrangement could work. That love could overcome class differences and judgment in the ghosts of past lives. That his small house in Somerville could hold a woman who came from mansions and wealth. That Sophie could have the family she'd been wishing for. Elena stayed for dinner, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, nothing fancy but made with care. Sophie talked nonstop about school, about drawings she wanted to make, about whether watercolors would be harder than colored pencils. Elena listened with focused attention, asking questions, making Sophie light up with every word. After Sophie went to bed, Marcus and Elena sat on his worn couch with terrible coffee and acknowledged the truth. Your parents will make every holiday a battle. I know. Sophie will face judgment, so will I. I know. This won't be easy. Elena turned to him, expression fierce. Nothing worth having is easy. My parents spent my whole life telling me what I should want, what would make me happy. They were wrong about everything. She took his hand. You and Sophie make me happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way I didn't know I could be. I'm not giving that up because my parents can't see past status and money. What if they never come around? Then I have a family anyway. This one. She gestured around the small living room. This is enough. You're enough. Marcus kissed her, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. Fear and hope and gratitude and love, all of it tangled together in the press of lips, the tangle of hands. When they broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. We're really doing this, he murmured. We're really doing this. Outside, Boston settled into March cold. Inside Marcus's small rental house, a family was forming from unlikely pieces. A widowed accountant, a lonely CEO, and a 7-year-old girl who just wanted someone to call mom. It wasn't the family any of them had planned. It wasn't conventional or simple or easy, but it was theirs, and they would fight for it. 3 weeks of silence from the Hartwells. Elena had expected calls, confrontations, the kind of pressure her parents typically applied when she made decisions they disapproved of. Instead, nothing. Radio silence more unnerving than conflict. She filled the void with Sophie and Marcus. Saturdays became a given, but other nights crept in too. Dinner on Wednesdays, helping with homework on Thursdays. Elena's penthouse in Seaport gathered dust, while she spent evenings in Marcus's cramped living room, teaching Sophie watercolor techniques Catherine had taught her decades ago. The parallels weren't lost on her. Her stepmother had earned Elena's trust through patient presence, showing up week after week until Elena stopped flinching at affection. Now, Elena was doing the same with Sophie, learning that motherhood wasn't biology but consistency. Being there when Sophie woke from nightmares, braiding her hair before school, remembering she hated broccoli but would eat carrots if ranch dressing was involved. Small things that added up to family. Marcus watched it all with an expression Elena was learning to read. Gratitude mixed with residual guilt, as if he still believed he should be able to do everything alone. She'd catch him sometimes, standing in doorways while she and Sophie worked on art projects, his face unguarded. Whatever walls he'd built after Jennifer died were coming down brick by brick. On a Tuesday in late March, Elena's phone rang during a product demo with potential clients in New York. She glanced at the screen, mother, and declined the call. 15 seconds later, it rang again. Then again. Elena excused herself from the video conference, stepped into her private office. What? Catherine's voice came through clipped, controlled. Your father and I would like to see you, and Marcus, and the child. Her name is Sophie. We'd like to see Sophie, a microscopic adjustment. This Saturday, neutral ground, Cafe Madeleine in Harvard Square, 2 o'clock. Elena's instinct screamed trap. Witalia, because you're our daughter, because you clearly intend to continue this relationship despite our concerns. A pause waited with something Elena couldn't identify. Because we'd like to try again. Properly. The word caught Elena off guard. Properly. As if the dinner had been a failed first draft, not a calculated attack. I need to talk to Marcus. Of course, let me know by Thursday. The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone, trying to decode the conversation. Her parents didn't admit mistakes, didn't ask for second chances, didn't use words like properly unless they were laying groundwork for something else. She called Marcus from her office, explained the situation. His immediate response, no, Marcus, they had their chance. They used it to make Sophie cry. I'm not putting her through that again. What if they've changed their minds? Even as Elena said it, doubt crept in. What if they actually want to try? People like your parents don't change in 3 weeks. The certainty in his voice stung because it mirrored her own suspicions. But underneath ran a thread of something else. Hope she didn't want to acknowledge. Hope that her parents might see what she saw. That family didn't have to mean choosing between the man she loved and the people who raised her. 1 hour, public place. The moment they say anything cruel, we leave. Lena's throat tightened. I need to try, Marcus. They're still my parents. And if there's any chance... Silence stretched on Marcus's end. Finally, 1 hour. But I'm asking Sophie first. If she doesn't want to go, we don't go. Sophie surprised them both. When Marcus explained the situation that evening, carefully emphasizing it was her choice, Sophie's response was immediate. Can we go? You don't have to, sweetheart. After what they said, I know. Sophie set down her colored pencil, met her father's eyes with disturbing maturity. But you said we should show them they're wrong. We can't do that if we never see them. Marcus looked at Elena, who'd stayed for dinner and was now witnessing his daughter be braver than both adults combined. You're sure? Yes. Besides, Elena will be there. And you? I'm not scared if you're there. The trust in her voice made Elena's eyes burn. This child who'd lost her mother, who'd watched her father struggle alone, who'd been rejected by date after date, she was willing to face judgment again because she believed in them, in the family they were building. Saturday arrived with the inevitability of execution day. Marcus wore his interview suit again, the one he'd bought for the disaster dinner. Elena wore designer jeans and a silk blouse, casual but expensive, a compromise between her world and his. Sophie had picked her own outfit, purple dress with leggings, the purple coat she loved. Battle armor in 7-year-old form. They drove separately to Harvard Square, meeting outside Café Madeleine. The cafe was aggressively neutral, exposed brick, reclaimed wood tables, the kind of place where Harvard professors graded papers while trust fund students pretended to study. Middle ground between Marcus's Somerville and Elena's Back Bay. Robert and Catherine were already seated at a corner table. They dressed down too, Robert in slacks and a sweater, Catherine in an elegant pantsuit without the Chanel armor. The visual concession felt calculated, but Elena chose to see it as effort. Sophie walked between Marcus and Elena, holding both their hands. When they reached the table, she extended her hand to Catherine without prompting. "Hello, Mrs. Hartwell." Catherine blinked, clearly not expecting formality from a child. She shook Sophie's hand. "Hello, Sophie. Thank you for coming." They sat. Elena positioned herself between Marcus and her parents, literal and metaphorical buffer. A waiter appeared immediately, Robert's world, where staff anticipated needs before they were voiced. They ordered coffee, hot chocolate for Sophie with extra whipped cream. Catherine spoke first, words clearly rehearsed. "We wanted to apologize for our behavior at dinner. We were rude, judgmental, and unkind. Particularly to you, Sophie. That was inexcusable." Sophie looked at Marcus, seeking guidance on how to respond. He gave a microscopic nod. "Accept the apology, but don't make it easy." "Thank you for saying that." Sophie's voice was small but steady. "It hurt my feelings when you said I made my daddy not good enough." Catherine's composure cracked. "I know, I'm sorry, I was wrong." "Why did you think that?" Sophie's question carried no guile, just genuine confusion. "My daddy takes care of me really good. He makes pancakes and helps with homework and reads stories. He's the best daddy." Robert cleared his throat. "We didn't question your father's devotion, Sophie. We questioned whether one person, regardless of dedication, could provide everything a child needs." "But I have two people now." Sophie gestured between Marcus and Elena. "Elena helps too. She teaches me art and reads to me and makes me laugh. So I have everything I need." The simple logic of a child cutting through adult complications. Elena watched her parents absorb this, saw something shift in Catherine's expression. Not quite acceptance, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Marcus stayed quiet, letting Sophie speak for herself, but his hand found Elena's under the table. Squeezed once. United front, even in silence. Robert leaned forward. "Marcus, I was unnecessarily harsh about your financial situation. Elena has explained that you didn't pursue her, that this relationship began at her instigation. Does that matter?" Marcus's tone was careful. "Whether I pursued her or she pursued me, you still think I'm not good enough." "I think," Robert chose words carefully, "I think I judged you by metrics that don't apply. You're not trying to access Elena's wealth. You haven't asked for anything." That's become clear. "I don't want Elena's money. I want Elena." "Then what happens when Sophie needs something you can't afford? College, medical care, opportunities that require resources you don't have?" Robert wasn't being cruel now, just pragmatic. "Pride doesn't pay tuition." The question landed like a blade between ribs. Marcus's jaw tightened. Elena opened her mouth to defend him, but he spoke first. "You're right. I can't afford private school or expensive art classes or Harvard. I'm doing the math every month, trying to make sure Sophie has what she needs, and most months I come up short." His voice stayed level. But Sophie isn't learning that her worth is measured in dollars. She's learning that love means showing up, working hard, sacrificing. Those are lessons your money can't buy. Catherine's expression flickered. Pain, maybe recognition. Money can't buy integrity. Agreed. But it can buy security, opportunity, access. Why should Sophie be denied those things because of pride? I'm not denying her anything. Aren't you? Catherine's voice softened. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something Elena doesn't know. Elena straightened. Mother, what? I grew up in Southie. Catherine's words dropped like stones. My father was a plumber. My mother cleaned houses. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with my 3 siblings. I shared a bedroom until I was 16. The revelation silenced the table. Elena stared at her mother, processing information that contradicted everything she'd believed about her family's history. Robert was old Boston money, sure, but Catherine? Catherine who obsessed over pedigree and status and belonging? I met your father at Boston University. Full scholarship. Only way I could afford it. His family hated me. Called me a gold digger. Trailer trash trying to social climb. Catherine's hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. It took 10 years for them to accept me. 10 years of proving I belonged, that I wasn't using Robert, that I was good enough for their precious son. She looked directly at Marcus. When I saw you and Sophie at that dinner, I saw my younger self, and I became the people I spent years hating. The people who told me I wasn't enough. Marcus absorbed this, recalibrating. Catherine's cruelty hadn't come from inherent snobbery, but from trauma. She'd fought so hard to belong that she couldn't tolerate anyone threatening that belonging, including her daughter choosing someone from the world Catherine had escaped. I'm sorry, Catherine's voice broke. I'm so sorry I did to you what was done to me. I'm sorry I made Sophie feel like she wasn't wanted. I was wrong about everything. Sophie's hand found Catherine's across the table. The gesture was instinctive, compassionate beyond her years. It's okay. My daddy says everybody makes mistakes. The important thing is fixing them. Catherine looked at this child she'd insulted, offering forgiveness without hesitation. Tears spilled over. You're very wise, Sophie. I know, my teacher says I'm advanced for my grade. The moment of lightness broke tension like snapping a cable. Robert even smiled, genuine, not the corporate expression he wore like armor. What's your favorite subject? Sophie launched into an explanation of art class, showing Robert drawings she'd brought in her backpack just in case. He examined them with focus that surprised Elena, asking questions about technique and inspiration. Not condescending, but engaged. Catherine and Elena stepped away to the counter, ostensibly for more coffee. Catherine touched her daughter's arm. I owe you an apology too. I've spent your whole life pushing you toward men I thought were suitable. Men from the right families, right schools, right circles. I never asked what you wanted. I wanted to be seen as more than a uterus and a trust fund. I know, and Marcus sees you that way. So does Sophie. Catherine's voice dropped. I watched how you are with her, how patient, how present. You're natural at this, Elena. You're going to be a wonderful mother. The words hit harder than they should have. Elena had spent years believing she'd failed at motherhood before even starting, because her body didn't cooperate. Hearing her mother, her complicated, damaged, difficult mother, say she'd be good at it anyway cracked something open. I'm scared. The admission came out raw. What if I mess it up? What if Sophie realizes I'm not her real mother and resents me? You won't mess it up. And you are her real mother. Real is about showing up, not biology. Catherine's hand covered Elena's. My stepmother taught me that. Now I'm teaching you. They returned to the table where Robert was explaining venture capital to Sophie, who was listening with more politeness than comprehension. Marcus looked up at Elena, question in his eyes. Are we okay? She nodded. Not perfect, not fixed, but okay. A beginning. They stayed at the cafe for 2 hours. Conversation remained careful, adults navigating around past damage. But Sophie's presence smoothed rough edges. She asked questions with child logic that forced honest answers. Why did rich people have so many forks? Because they wanted to show off, Robert admitted with self-deprecating humor. Why did Mrs. Hartwell change her name when she got married? Because that's what women did then, Catherine explained. Though if she had it to do over, she might keep her own name. When they finally stood to leave, Catherine pulled Sophie aside. Would you like to learn watercolors? Real classes. At the Museum of Fine Arts, I teach a program for children on Saturday mornings. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? You teach art? I do. Have for 15 years. It's my favorite thing. Catherine glanced at Marcus. If your father agrees, you could join my class. No charge, I'd love to have you. Marcus's pride warred with practicality. Free art classes from the Museum of Fine Arts, taught by his daughter's grandmother-to-be. His instinct that screamed to refuse, to insist he'd find a way to pay for classes himself. But Sophie's expression, hope and excitement and longing, made the decision for him. That's very generous. Thank you. Sophie hugged Catherine spontaneously, fiercely. Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. Call me Grandma Catherine, if that's okay with you. Sophie looked at Marcus for permission. He nodded, swallowing hard. Grandma Catherine. Robert shook Marcus's hand at the curb. I'd like to take you to lunch. Just the two of us, next week if you're available. Marcus's suspicion must have shown because Robert's mouth twitched toward a smile. Not an ambush. I want to understand your work. Forensic accounting, you catch people who steal from their companies? Essentially, yes. I analyze financial patterns, identify irregularities that suggest fraud or embezzlement. Interesting. I have a colleague dealing with some irregularities in his portfolio company's books. Would you be willing to consult? Paid, naturally. Your standard rate plus a premium for short notice. The job offer disguised as a lunch invitation. Marcus's forensic accounting skills suddenly valuable to Robert's network. It could be genuine, or it could be Robert trying to obligate Marcus, create dependency. Hard to tell which. Elena caught Marcus's eye, gave the smallest nod. Take the risk. Give them a chance. Sure, I'll bring my calendar to lunch. They parted with tentative warmth. Not the instant reconciliation of movies, but something more realistic. Damaged people trying to do better. Sophie waved at her new grandparents from the back seat of Marcus's Honda, and they waved back. In the car, Sophie bounced with excitement. I get to take real art classes at a museum with Grandma Catherine. Marcus met Elena's eyes in the rearview mirror. She sat in the back seat with Sophie, choosing the child over the adult position in front. Always choosing Sophie. He mouthed, thank you. She mouthed back, I love you. 6 months dissolved into routine. Catherine's Saturday watercolor classes became sacred time. Sophie disappeared into the Museum of Fine Arts for 3 hours while Marcus and Elena had time alone. Sometimes they used it for practical things, grocery shopping, errands, the mundane tasks of cohabitating, even though they weren't officially living together yet. Other times they'd get coffee and just talk, remembering they were more than parents to Sophie. They were people with their own connection. Robert's lunch led to consulting work. Marcus found himself pulled into the world of high-stakes corporate investigations, discovering that his skills translated well beyond mid-market audits. A pharmaceutical company with discrepancies in R&D spending. A restaurant chain where the CFO was skimming. A nonprofit whose executive director had creative interpretations of administrative costs. The work paid triple his Morrison rate. Marcus banked every penny, telling himself it was for Sophie's college fund. But really, it was armor against Robert's wealth. Proof he could provide, even if his scale was smaller. Elena noticed his pride wouldn't bend easily, approached it sideways one Sunday morning for pancakes while Sophie drew at the table. I've been thinking about combining households. Marcus's spatula paused mid-flip. Moving in together? Eventually. But first, practical things. We're spending almost every night together anyway, splitting our time between your place and mine. It's inefficient. Inefficient. Elena's CEO speak for emotional topics made him smile. Very romantic. I'm serious. Your lease is up in September. My penthouse has 3 bedrooms gathering dust. Sophie could have her own space, room for a proper art studio. You'd be closer to work, 20-minute commute instead of 45. All logical reasons that conveniently ignored the real issue. Your penthouse costs more per month than I earn in a year. So I can't contribute equally. You'd be supporting us. Elena set down her coffee with deliberate care. Marcus, we need to talk about money. Really talk about it, not dance around your pride. It's not about pride. It's completely about pride. And I understand why. You've been taking care of Sophie alone, proving you don't need help, building a life from nothing. That's admirable. She leaned forward. But we're building something together now. That means sharing resources. You wouldn't let me pay a rent on this place even though I'm here 5 nights a week. You won't let me contribute to groceries. You barely let me buy Sophie art supplies without feeling guilty. Marcus flipped the pancake harder than necessary, because I should be able to provide for my own daughter. And you do, beautifully, but I'm going to be her mother, legally, officially, once we get married. Parents provide for children together. That's how it works. The word married hung in the air. They'd talked around it, assumed it, but never said it explicitly. Not since that first bizarre proposal at the restaurant 6 months ago. The transactional arrangement had transformed into something real, but the mechanics remained undefined. Once we get married, Marcus repeated it slowly. Elena blinked. Yes, I mean, that's where this is heading, right? Or did you think we'd just date forever? I assumed. He turned off the stove, faced her fully. Elena, are you proposing again? I suppose I am. Less transactional this time. Her hands twisted together, nervous tells breaking through CEO composure. Marcus Chen, will you marry me? Will you let me be Sophie's mom officially? Will you trust me enough to share your life, including the parts that scare you like money and dependency and asking for help? Sophie's crayon stopped moving. Are you getting married? For real? Elena kept her eyes on Marcus. That depends on what your dad says. Marcus thought about the journey from that Christmas night to this April morning. How Elena had shown up week after week, earning Sophie's trust and his love. How she'd faced her parents' judgment and chosen them anyway. How she'd learned to make terrible cookies in worse drawings, finding joy in imperfection. How she made their small life feel complete. He thought about Jennifer too, what she'd want for Sophie, for him. He'd spent 6 years holding on to grief, afraid that moving forward meant leaving her behind. But grief wasn't loyalty. It was fear disguised as fidelity. Letting go didn't erase Jennifer. It just made room for Elena to stand beside her memory instead of trying to compete with it. Yes, his voice came out rough. Yes, I'll marry you again. Sophie shrieked, launching herself at both adults. They caught her in a tangle of arms and laughter, pancakes forgotten. I'm getting a mom, a real mom. Elena held them both, tears streaming. You're getting a mom, and I'm getting a family. Seems like a good deal. The best deal, Sophie agreed with 7-year-old authority. They married in September. Not the society wedding Catherine probably envisioned, but something smaller, more meaningful. Lyman Estate in Waltham, a historic property with gardens gone gold with autumn. 40 guests, close friends, family, colleagues who'd become friends. Sophie stood beside Elena in a purple dress she'd picked herself, holding a bouquet of lilies she'd insisted on because they shared a name with her old one. Elena wore ivory silk, simple and elegant. Marcus wore his interview suit, now lucky instead of desperate. Robert walked Elena down the aisle, and the parallel to Catherine's journey wasn't lost on anyone. 2 generations of women choosing men their families initially rejected, proving that love transcended social mathematics. The vows were traditional until the end, when Elena turned to Sophie. Sophie, I promise to be the best mom I can be, to support your dreams, encourage your talent, and be there when you need me. You've taught me what it means to be a mother, and I'm grateful every day for that gift. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. The officiant hadn't planned for this part, but he waited while Sophie threw her arms around Elena's waist. I promise to be a good daughter, and to teach you to draw better. You're still not very good. Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Marcus pulled them both close, this family they'd built from loneliness and impossible proposals. The officiant pronounced them married, and Sophie cheered before anyone could kiss. At the reception, Robert found Marcus near the bar. They'd developed an unlikely rapport over 6 months of consulting work and awkward family dinners. Robert still had his opinions, still defaulted to measuring value in dollars. But he'd learned to ask questions before making judgments, to listen before dismissing. Catherine wanted me to give you this. He handed Marcus an envelope. Don't open it now. Later when you're alone. Marcus felt the weight, not paper, something heavier. What is it? A trust fund for Sophie's education. Everything through graduate school, if she chooses. Robert held up a hand before Marcus could protest. It's not charity. It's a grandfather's gift to his granddaughter. You can accept help without diminishing yourself. The words echoed Elena's from months ago. Accepting help wasn't weakness. It was trust, allowing people you love to show their love in return. Thank you. Also, Morrison called, asked if I'd spoken to you about their partner offer. Marcus's stomach dropped. Partner offer? They didn't tell you yet? Ted Morrison mentioned they're expanding, bringing you on as partner. Apparently, your consulting work caught attention in the right circles, enhanced their reputation. Robert's smile was genuine. You did that, Marcus. Your skills, your work. Nobody bought your position. The relief was physical. Marcus had worried the consulting gigs were favors, Robert pulling strings. But he'd earned this himself. When do they want an answer? Monday. But take your time. It's a big decision. More money, more responsibility, more hours. Talk it over with Elena and Sophie. Family decisions should be made by families. The word family from Robert's mouth still felt surreal. This man who'd called Sophie a burden 6 months ago now casually included her in major life choices. People could change. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to matter. Elena found Marcus on the terrace after dinner, escaping the noise for a moment. She'd kicked off her heels, was standing barefoot on stone looking out at gardens lit by string lights. Hiding? He wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, savoring. This is real now. Legal, official, permanent. Having second thoughts? Never. She turned in his arms. I spent so long thinking I was incomplete because I couldn't have biological children. Thought it made me less of a woman, less deserving of love. Then I found you and Sophie, and I realized family isn't biology. It's choice. We chose each other. Marcus kissed her, tasting champagne and promise. Behind them, through the windows, Sophie danced with Catherine while Robert looked on with grandfatherly pride. Their small family had expanded, grown to include people who'd once seemed like enemies. Morrison offered me partner, Marcus murmured against Elena's hair. She pulled back, eyes bright. That's amazing. When? Robert told me tonight. I meet with Ted Monday. He hesitated. It means longer hours, more travel. I don't know if I can do that and still be present for Sophie. We'll figure it out. That's what partners do. We share the load. Some weeks I'll pick Sophie up from school. Some weeks you will. We're not doing this alone anymore. The idea still felt foreign after 6 years of solo parenting, but Elena had proven herself 100 times over. She'd earned his trust. Okay, I'll take the offer. Good. Now come dance with your wife before Sophie monopolizes you all night. They returned to the reception hand in hand. Sophie ran up, grabbed them both. Come on, they're playing the chicken dance, Elena groaned. That's the most terrible wedding tradition. Please, Sophie deployed weapons-grade puppy eyes. Marcus laughed at Elena's defeated expression. Come on, Mrs. Chen. Family traditions are important. Mrs. Hartwell Chen, she corrected. I'm keeping my name professionally, but I like the sound of Mrs. Chen, too. They joined the dance floor, flapping their arms ridiculously while Sophie collapsed in giggles. Around them, guests joined in, Rachel with her new boyfriend, Ted Morrison, surprisingly game. Even Robert and Catherine attempting the moves with dignity challenging results. This was family. Messy, imperfect, built from broken pieces that didn't quite fit at first, but had learned to mesh through patience and effort. Not the fairy tale Elena had stopped believing in, or the second chance Marcus had feared to hope for. Something better, real life with its complications and compromises, and joy found in unexpected places. That night, after the reception ended and Sophie fell asleep in the car before they reached Elena's penthouse, their penthouse now, the place they had officially moved into together last week, Marcus carried his daughter to her new room. It was 3 times the size of her old one, with built-in shelves for art supplies and a window overlooking Boston Harbor. He tucked her into bed, brushed hair back from her forehead. She stirred, eyes opening halfway. Did we really get married today? We really did. So Elena is my mom now, for real? For real. She adopted you legally. Your birth certificate will say Elena Hartwell Chen as your mother. Sophie smiled, eyes drifting closed again. Good. I always wanted a mom. Marcus stayed until her breathing evened out, then joined Elena in their bedroom. She changed into pajamas, was taking off her jewelry at the dresser. He watched her through the doorway, this woman who'd walked into his life with an insane proposal and somehow made it work. What are you thinking? She caught his reflection in the mirror. That I'm lucky. That Sophie is lucky. That we almost missed this because I was too scared and proud to take a risk. Elena set down her necklace, turned to face him. But you took the risk anyway. That's what matters. He crossed the room, pulled her close. Thank you. For what? For being crazy enough to ask a stranger to marry you. For not giving up when I pushed you away. For loving Sophie like she's yours. She is mine. You both are. Elena's arms tightened around him. This is everything I didn't know I needed. You saved me as much as I saved you. They stood holding each other while Boston glittered outside their windows. The city where they'd met on Christmas night, where they'd built something impossible into something real, where a lonely CEO and an exhausted single father had found each other and created family from desperation and hope. Months passed. Sophie started second grade at a private school near their seaport apartment. Not because Marcus's pride had disappeared, but because Elena had framed it as Sophie deserving the best resources for her obvious talent. Catherine continued teaching watercolors on Saturday mornings. Robert occasionally joined Marcus for lunch, their relationship evolving into genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than tolerance. Work expanded for both Marcus and Elena. His partnership at Morrison came with challenging cases and respect from colleagues who'd seen him as merely competent before. Elena's company won a major government contract, expanding to 300 employees. They were busy, stretched thin some weeks, but they'd learned to communicate, to ask for help, to share the burden of building both careers and family. Sophie thrived. Her art became more sophisticated, layering techniques Catherine taught with her own emerging style. She made friends at the new school, invited them for sleepovers, where they'd stay up late drawing and giggling. She called Elena Mom without hesitation, though sometimes late at night she'd ask Marcus about Jennifer. He'd tell her stories, keeping those memories alive, and Elena would join them, listening without jealousy to tales of the woman whose absence had made space for her presence. On a December evening, nearly a year after that first Christmas encounter, the three of them walked through Boston Common. Snow fell lightly, coating trees in white. Sophie ran ahead, making snow angels, while Marcus and Elena followed hand in hand. We should come here every Christmas, Sophie called back. Make it a tradition. I like that idea. Elena squeezed Marcus's hand. Start our own traditions. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in cold air and possibility. A year ago, he'd been sitting in a restaurant being rejected by yet another woman who couldn't handle his complicated life. Convinced he'd be alone forever, that Sophie would grow up without the mother she deserved. Then Elena had asked an insane question, and everything changed. What are you thinking? Elena bumped his shoulder. That sometimes the craziest ideas work out. She laughed, the sound carrying in cold air. Are you saying marrying a stranger was crazy? Completely insane. Best decision I ever made. Sophie ran back, grabbed both their hands. Come see my angel. I made it extra big. They let themselves be pulled toward the snow angel, this child who belonged to both of them now. Not through biology, but through choice, through showing up day after day, through loving her enough to fight for her even when fighting meant facing judgment and doubt. Marcus looked at Elena across Sophie's head. She met his eyes, smiled. No words needed. They both understood what they'd built. Not perfect, not easy, but real. A family forged from loneliness and impossible proposals, from taking risks when every instinct screamed to protect your heart. Sometimes the best things in life started with crazy questions and desperate hope. Sometimes you had to trust that love could bridge gaps that logic said were too wide. Sometimes you had to be brave enough to say yes to strangers who saw something in you that you'd stopped seeing in yourself. Sophie's snow angel was indeed extra big, arms spread wide like she was embracing the sky. It's beautiful, kiddo. It's us. Sophie pointed to three distinct sections. See? You, me, and Mom. A family. Marcus's throat tightened. That's exactly what we are. Elena crouched beside Sophie, both of them adding details to the snow angel. Marcus watched them together, mother and daughter in every way that mattered, and sent a silent thank you to Jennifer for making him promise to be happy, for giving him Sophie, for loving him enough to want him to find love again, and to Elena for being crazy enough to ask, for seeing past his defenses to the man who desperately wanted to not be alone, for choosing them every day, proving that family wasn't about bloodlines or bank accounts or meeting someone else's definition of enough. They were enough, just as they were. A forensic accountant, a CEO, and a second grader who loved purple and drawing. An unlikely family built on an impossible foundation, proving that sometimes the best love stories started with the most insane proposals. Snow continued falling as they made their way home through Boston's streets, three sets of footprints in the snow slowly filling in behind them. Ahead lay years of complications and compromises, of blending lives and negotiating differences. But they'd face it together, this family they'd chosen and fought for and built from broken pieces. And that was more than enough.